I want us to talk a bit about international justice and its role, because up to today, despite all the signs of growth, transformation, even within the justice system of Rwanda, there are still countries that continue to harbor these genocides. And some of them are arrested in those countries, but they refuse to repatriate them back to Rwanda to face justice. What's the claim? They will not access fair trial. I mean, it seems Rwanda needs to validate itself to show that we can do it. Read or tell us what you feel, especially on that aspect of access to justice. 30 years later, we have victims, we have survivors who are still yearning for justice. We've talked about Kabuga, who could probably be released because of the claims that he can't stand trial. I want to read your thoughts. When you listen to survivors, what are you hearing from them on this aspect of international justice?
Thank you very much. I'm not going to restrict myself to just survivors. It's quite clear that in Rwanda there is a fairly significant degree of dissatisfaction with so-called international justice. Now, I'm not sure in what sense we should be referring to whatever we are talking about as international justice. Because what has happened in terms of how the world views Rwanda or Rwanda's institutions has to do with how Rwanda is reported about in media. International media seem to have a knack for, and I'm not sure if this is deliberate, but I think that they do have this idea that they know everything and they project what they know onto the world. And it's usually what they know that we also get to know and believe to be true. The refusal by some jurisdictions to return genocide perpetrators to Rwanda has to do with this idea that somehow the judiciary in Rwanda is not independent. Now, those of us who live in the country know that this is not true. But also we know that there are jurisdictions that have gone beyond this idea and actually returned genocide or alleged genocide perpetrators to Rwanda. Canada has done it, the United States has done it. The Scandinavian countries have been much more willing than others to return these people to Rwanda. And as far as we know, the evidence that we see is that when they have been committed to trial, these trials have satisfied what people may refer to as international standards. So I think that alongside the general dissatisfaction with international justice is this ever-present idea inside Rwanda that Rwanda is misrepresented in many ways. Now I can give you one of the most annoying but current examples is this argument about whether Britain should send are they refugees? Asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing before a decision is made about what should happen to them. Now, those who are opposing this in Britain keep saying, oh, you know, Rwanda is not a democracy and these people's rights are not going to be respected and so on and so forth. But actually what people do not seem to take into account is that Britain suggested this to Rwanda after Rwanda had actually been doing this for years by itself. When President Kagame became the chairman of the AU, he decided that African refugees who were being mistreated in Libya, who were being sold as slaves and so on and so forth, could be relocated from Libya and taken to other places where they would find safety. Now, he proposed this as something that could be taken up by different countries, but no country stepped up to do it. Now, Rwanda started evacuating African refugees from Libya. There were Ethiopians, Eritreans, Sudanese, different nationalities, and bringing them to Rwanda, housing them, feeding them, and keeping them in Rwanda pending their processing for relocation to third countries. Now, this wasn't funded by any foreign government, although the UNHCR was helping. A lot of these people that came to Rwanda under this program left Rwanda, went to Canada, went to various places, others went to Uganda, but no one has actually accused Rwanda of having violated their rights. It's only until Britain saw what Rwanda was doing successfully on its own and suggested they could also actually handle their asylum seekers from Rwanda. And now this whole thing of, these people, Rwanda is not safe for refugees, Rwanda is not safe for asylum seekers, and so on and so forth. That's one example. In Rwanda, we have a school of girls from Afghanistan. An entire school was relocated from Afghanistan and brought to Rwanda. Now, these young girls from Afghanistan and all their teachers have been living in Rwanda for years. God knows whether they will go back to Afghanistan or move on to another country, but they're living in Rwanda and they're safe. But every time I look at British media, the people in Britain who the government suggests should be brought to Rwanda are now being seen as hapless victims. These are going to be victims of suppression and blah, 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 blah. We have a full medical school from Sudan, which has been relocated to Rwanda. Dozens of Sudanese young medical students are now living and studying in Rwanda. The whole school was evacuated to Rwanda. No one is telling us that these people are being suppressed or oppressed or their rights are being violated. So it's this continuous misreporting by these pompous Western journalists who are ignorant of what happens in the country that now informs international public opinion about Rwanda. But the facts are there and anyone can see them. Now, let me just go back to a little bit to the question you raised to Lonzen about there being no room for dissent in Rwanda. I mentioned the National Forum of Political Organizations. Now, as I said before, post-genocide Rwanda is very nervous about recreating the conditions that led to the genocide. And one of the conditions was this endless dissenting in the streets, people fighting in the streets, parties fighting, transferring these conflicts into the communities. So post-genocide Rwanda is very nervous about recreating those conditions. This is the basis for the creation of the National Forum of Political Organizations, so that political organizations that are not in parliament can meet with their counterparts in the forum and deal with those matters that could otherwise create the kind of dissent that exporters of conventional multi-party politics want to see in each and every country. So the National Forum of Political Organizations is a space for political parties to dissent and to argue among themselves. And just to go a little bit into the details, in the National Forum of Political Organizations, however large a party is, however small it is, each party is represented by 4 people. Decision-making in this forum is by absolute consensus.
Yeah, but let me probe you on that just a second.
Yeah.
And it is that actually creates that notion.
No, perhaps if you could just allow me to, finish my point.
Okay, fair enough.
Where one could say there is no space for dissent, there's actually a lot of space for discussion. And I am now involved in trying to draw up the sector strategic plan for the Ministry of Local Government. And one of the conversations we're having is whether there's just simply too many forums in Rwanda where people are supposed to participate in decision making. Because in my opinion, there's simply too many. And what we see now is participation fatigue. So forums have been created across the country. In communities, we have communal work. People go to do communal work every last Saturday of the month, and they discuss their own issues within their own communities. There are forums for parents, there are forums for women, there are forums for youth. The entire country is teeming with forums for discussion. And some of us are beginning to think, this is simply too much. You're putting too many demands on ordinary people to discuss things that they would rather not be discussing. So where there is no room for dissent, there is room for discussion. You must know about the National Dialogue Council.
Yes.
Well, this is a meeting that happens every year in Rwanda, bringing together all the leaders in the country in their different categories. Now, you will have a few hundred people sitting in a room in Kigali. This meeting is being broadcast live on radio. It is broadcast live on TV. It is being streamed on the internet. So Rwandans inside the country and Rwandans outside the country can actually participate in this meeting. Rwandans in Kigali, Rwandans outside Kigali can participate in this meeting. The president is there, ministers are there, governors are there, security chiefs are there. Rwandans can phone in and complain about all kinds of things. Now, when somebody says there's no room for dissent in Rwanda, do they know that there is such a thing as a National Dialogue Council? Do they know about the National Forum of Political Organizations? Do they know about all these different forums across the entire country where people are now saying, guys, we are tired of taking part in these endless discussions?
Right.